What's going on guys, Bunks here, and today I've got a No Man's Sky beginner guide video for you where I'm going to be telling you 11 really easy steps to make yourself millions of units in no time at all early on in the game. All of these methods require no startup money and only the early basic resources and equipment which you can get almost straight away. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get stuck in. Right, first up we're going to talk about how much money you can make by using your personal refiner. Now, most of the basic resources you gather early on in the game aren't worth that much money by themselves. For example, you'll probably find that you've gathered hundreds if not thousands of units of ferrite dust, but the entire stack is worth not much at all really. It's only 14 units per single ferrite dust. But if you want to, you can lob it in your personal refiner a couple of times to make pure ferrite, and then from there you can make magnetized ferrite, which is now worth 82 units apiece, which is almost 6 times the value. Pretty neat, right? Now of course there are more valuable resources that you can do this with that you can gather early on, one example being cobalt, which is worth 198 units a pop by itself, but it can be refined into ionized cobalt, which is worth 401 units a pop. And if you have just 500 units of ionized cobalt, that's a nice 200,000 units when selling it on the space station. So make sure you spend some time refining those earlier gathered resources into more valuable resources if you want to make a decent amount of money quickly. I would however recommend keeping hold of that cobalt as it is, and you'll find out why in just a couple of minutes. Right, next up I'm going to talk about asteroids, and more specifically shooting them. You only need to spend a minute in deep space to realise just how many asteroids there are, and if you spend just 10 minutes shooting an entire bunch of them, you're going to bag yourself some pretty valuable resources. You will notice that you get a lot of tritium from shooting asteroids, which is valuable in itself for charging your pulse drive amongst other things, but we're interested in the stuff that you get from them which is worth money, and that is gold, silver and platinum. It won't take you long shooting asteroids to rack up a stack of even just 500 of these. So silver is worth 186 units a pop, so having 500 of these will get you about 93,000 units. Gold is worth 353 units a pop, so having 500 units of gold is going to get you just under 180,000 units. And finally, platinum is worth 505 units a pop, so having 500 platinum is going to get you just over 250,000 units. That's not bad, right, for just shooting some asteroids for say 10-15 minutes or so. So, I mentioned earlier to keep hold of your cobalt and not refine all of it into ionized cobalt, because you can make millions of units by doing something completely different. So of course you can gather cobalt from caves which are found on the vast majority of planets throughout No Man's Sky, and by spending just 10 to 15 minutes mining cobalt from these caves you can rack up hundreds if not thousands of units of the stuff. Now that by itself would be worth a pretty penny, but we want to make millions, right? Of course we do. So, it is a little known fact that you can crash the economy in each system using various resources, but cobalt is by far the best because it's the most expensive resource available on all regular space stations. Crashing the market with cobalt involves you selling stacks of the stuff for a lot of money and buying it back at about an 80% discount, and doing this in every system you visit which has a regular space station is going to make you millions if you spend just an hour doing so. I have actually created a full guide on how to do this and make yourself a few hundred million units, so check that out. I'll leave a link to the video in the description below for you. So another thing that's widely available on the vast majority of planets you visit, in this case just under the planet's surface, is buried technology. Now these are useful for a lot of things and not just making money. However, if you gather a large amount of these, you can sell them for a good chunk of money on the space station. One salvage data from buried technology is worth roughly 50,000 units, so even having 10 of these is going to net you 500,000 units, but be sure to keep a few in your inventory for other purposes, such as purchasing blueprints on board the Anomaly or refining into nanites, and more on both of those in just a second. And whilst you're here folks, it would be totally awesome if you could support my channel by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Now then, if you did keep a few salvage data from buried technology like I mentioned, you want to purchase yourself a medium-sized refiner on board the Anomaly for this next one. This next one involves farming chlorine, and to get chlorine you first need plenty of salt. Now salt is a reasonably common resource, you just need to scan the planet from space to see if it contains salt, and if it does, then head on down there and gather a stack of it. And then once you have a good full stack of salt, you want to stick it into a personal refiner to make yourself some chlorine. Simple enough, right? And here's where the medium-sized refiner comes into play. If you have a freighter or a base somewhere, then head there and place a medium-sized refiner down and then load that medium refiner with the whole stack of chlorine, but don't set it off just yet. Because first you want to stick a stack of oxygen into the other slot of the medium refiner, and you will see that from 1 chlorine and 2 oxygen you are now able to make 6 chlorine, which in itself is just nuts. You're making 6 times the amount of chlorine for the small price of some oxygen. So let's say you had 500 chlorine and you turn that into 3000 chlorine, and as chlorine's worth 602 units a pop, that 3000 chlorine is going to net you roughly 1.8 million units. Pretty awesome, right? Now do this as much as you want. Moving on, these next 3 things aren't as common as some of the previously mentioned resources, but they're common enough to include them in this beginner guide, and they're all worth a lot of units in themselves. I'm talking about gravitino balls, albumin pearls, and larval cores. You can spot albumin pearls and gravitino balls through your analysis visor as orange or gold stars, indicating that they're a fairly valuable resource. Gravitino balls are worth about 40,000 units a pop, and albumin pearls are worth just over 10,000 units a pop, so it's worth gathering a few of these when you come across them. However, a word of warning on these: when you do gather them, you will have some sentinels on your back, so be ready to make a quick escape. And then moving on to larval cores, which come from the opening of whispering eggs, these can be found most commonly around abandoned buildings on planets, and they will appear as a red warning on your analysis visor. One single larval core is worth almost 70,000 units a pop, and usually you'll find a few together, so you can make a good few 100,000 units here. But a big word of warning: once you crack open a whispering egg, you're going to be swarmed by some biological horrors. So my advice here is to dig a tunnel underneath the whispering egg and grab the larval core from there. Hopefully those biological horrors won't get in your tunnel, but if they do, be sure to be ready for a quick escape just in case. So let's talk about ships, and more specifically crashed ones. There are a few ways to come across these, and I've created a video previously showing you the fastest ways to find these crashed ships, but the quick version of it is buy some distress beacon maps from the cartographer on board a space station, and some of the time these will indicate an unoccupied crashed ship, which you can claim for yourself for free. Now the type of crashed ship is totally random, and sometimes you can get lucky and grab one worth millions of units. So all you need to do is fix it up enough to fly it on board the space station and then sell it for scrap, and voila! Millions of scrap to sell at the trade terminal, along with some upgrade modules to sell for a few hundred nanites. Winner winner, money and nanites for dinner. Right then, moving on to 2 very valuable things which are reasonably common throughout the cosmos, and these 2 things are ancient bones and salvageable scrap. To figure out whether a planet has these on them, just scan the planet from space and it will say if they're there next to a gold Wi-Fi signal similar to that of a buried technology module. And once you're on a planet that contains these, use your analysis visor and scan for the gold Wi-Fi signal, and these will indicate where you can find either ancient bones or salvageable scrap depending on the planet. Now these are both located just underground, so you are going to need a terrain manipulator, and there is a chance that when you're excavating salvageable scrap that the sentinels are going to be on your back as soon as you get it, so be ready for a quick escape once again. Now on to the more interesting stuff about ancient bones and salvageable scrap. Depending on your luck, the value of these will range anywhere from 60,000 units to almost 2 million units a pop, so it's worth spending some time gathering up a good amount of these and then selling them on board the space station. I've got one final notable mention on making money early, but that does require you to have a few hundred nanites initially to be able to make these hundreds of thousands of units. So on board the space station you can buy multi-tool upgrades, and if you ever come across S-class scanner upgrades here, be sure to buy them if you can afford them and then add them to your multi-tool. These upgrades will take you from earning a couple thousand units per creature and plant scan to earning a couple of 100,000 units per creature scan and tens of thousands of units per plant scan and mineral scan. So over time, when visiting many new planets, these upgrades are going to net you millions of units. So if you can afford those upgrades, buy them and then use them. And that, folks, is 11 methods or items that are going to get you millions of units very early on in No Man's Sky, and it won't take you much time at all to do it. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, it would be totally awesome if you could support my channel by hitting those like and subscribe buttons. I will be doing more beginner guides like this, amazing locations, updated rumours, glitches and much more to do with No Man's Sky, so you don't want to miss out on those, right? And as always, thank you for watching and catch you next time.